The church fell silent except for the echo of heels clicking against marble floors. Grace stood at the altar, her hand trembling in her fiancé's grip as every head turned toward the sound. The heavy oak doors at the back of the church swung open with a bang that made several guests gasp. "Stop this wedding." 3 words. That's all it took for Grace's carefully planned day to tilt sideways. Natasha strode down the aisle in a designer dress that probably cost more than Grace's entire wedding budget. Her stepsister's face was twisted in disgust, as if she'd just stepped in something foul. Behind her, Grace's stepfather tried to grab her arm, but Natasha shook him off. "This is ridiculous," Natasha announced to the entire congregation. Her voice carried through the small church, bouncing off stained glass windows that suddenly felt too bright, too exposing. "Grace, what are you doing? Have you completely lost your mind?" Grace felt her fiancé's thumb trace circles on her palm. A gentle reminder that she wasn't alone. The officiant, an elderly woman with kind eyes, looked uncertain about whether to continue or call for security. "Natasha, please," Grace's mother whispered from the front pew. Her face had gone pale. "No, Mom married into our family, which makes Grace my responsibility." Natasha stopped 3 feet from the altar, her arms crossed. "And I can't let her make this mistake. You're marrying a waiter, Grace. A waiter. Do you understand how pathetic that is?" The word hung in the air like smoke. Pathetic. Grace had heard worse from Natasha over the years. Ever since her mother had married Natasha's father when Grace was 12, she'd been subjected to a constant stream of criticism. Her clothes were too cheap. Her college wasn't prestigious enough. Her apartment was in the wrong neighborhood. But this felt different. This was supposed to be her day, and Natasha had turned it into a spectacle. "I've watched you struggle for years," Natasha continued, warming to her topic now. "Working 2 jobs, living in that tiny place wearing the same outfits over and over. And now you're going to chain yourself to someone who will keep you in poverty forever? I thought you were smarter than this." Grace's fiancé stepped forward slightly. His voice was calm, almost amused. "I think you should leave." "Oh, he speaks." Natasha let out a harsh laugh. "Tell me, waiter, how exactly do you plan to support my sister?" "With tips. With the minimum wage you make serving other people's food." "I'm not your sister," Grace found her voice finally. It came out stronger than she expected. "We're not related. And you have no right to be here." "I have every right. Someone needs to save you from yourself." Natasha's eyes glittered. "You could have had so much more. Preston Banks asked about you at the country club last month. He's a lawyer, Grace. A real professional with a real future. But no, you chose this." She waved dismissively at Grace's fiancé. Grace felt anger building in her chest. All those years of taking Natasha's abuse, of swallowing her pride, of pretending the cruel comments didn't cut deep. Every instance flooded back at once. "I love him," Grace said quietly. "Love." Natasha spat the word like it tasted bad. "Love doesn't pay rent, Grace. Love doesn't buy food. Love doesn't get you into the right social circles. I'm trying to help you see reality before you ruin your entire life." "The only person ruining anything right now is you," Grace's fiancé said. His tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "You've made your opinion clear. Now leave." "Who do you think you are?" Natasha turned her full attention to him for the first time. "You work in food service. You probably live in a worse place than Grace does. And you think you have the right to tell me what to do?" Grace's fiancé smiled. Actually smiled. It was a private sort of expression, like he knew something funny that no one else did. "Should we tell her who I really am?" he murmured to Grace, quiet enough that only she could hear. Grace shook her head slightly. She'd wanted to tell Natasha the truth so many times over the past 6 months. Wanted to see her stepsister's face when she learned that the waiter was actually one of the wealthiest men in the state. But something had always stopped her. Maybe it was wanting to prove that she didn't need wealth to be happy. Maybe it was knowing that the truth would be so much sweeter later. "Not yet," Grace whispered back. "Let her think what she wants." Her fiancé nodded, understanding immediately. That was what she loved most about him. He never needed long explanations. He just got it. "Fine," Natasha threw up her hands. "Marry him. Live in poverty. Struggle for the rest of your life. But don't come crying to me when reality hits and you realize what a mistake you've made." She turned on her heel and marched back up the aisle. The doors slammed behind her with a sound that seemed to shake the building. For a moment, nobody moved. The congregation sat frozen, unsure if more drama was coming. Grace's mother started to rise, probably to go after Natasha, but her husband put a hand on her shoulder. He looked embarrassed. Ashamed even. Good. The officiant cleared her throat. Shall we continue? Grace looked at her fiancé. Really looked at him. He wore a simple but well-tailored suit. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would give away the truth about his bank account or the empire he'd built. His dark eyes held warmth and a hint of mischief. I'm so sorry, she said. For what? He genuinely seemed puzzled. For her. For the scene. For everything. He squeezed her hand. Grace, I don't care what she thinks. I never have. The only opinion that matters to me is yours. I want to marry you, Grace said. The words came easily now. I wanted to marry you before she burst in, and I still want to marry you now. Then let's do this. He turned to the officiant. Please continue. The elderly woman smiled with relief and opened her book again. Where were we? Yes. Do you, Grace Helen Morrison, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Grace took a deep breath. I do. And do you, Alexander James Thornton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, he said without hesitation. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. Grace heard the words, repeated her vows, accepted the ring that slid onto her finger. But part of her mind was still processing what had just happened. Natasha had actually crashed her wedding. Had called her pathetic in front of everyone she knew. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss your bride," Alexander cupped Grace's face gently and kissed her. The church erupted in applause, perhaps louder than it would have been without the interruption. People were overcompensating, trying to drown out the ugliness with joy. As they walked back up the aisle together, Grace saw familiar faces. Her best friend Rachel was crying happy tears. Her former roommate gave her a thumbs up. Her boss from the restaurant where she'd worked looked proud. But she also saw empty seats where Natasha and her father had been sitting. They'd left. Good. Outside the church, the photographer tried to gather everyone for pictures, but Grace's mind was elsewhere. She kept replaying Natasha's words. Pathetic. Marrying a waiter. Living in poverty. Hey! Alexander pulled her aside while the photographer set up the group shot. Are you okay? I don't know, Grace admitted. That was worse than I expected. We can tell people the truth right now if you want. And this. Grace considered it. Would be so easy. One announcement and everyone would know that Alexander Thornton wasn't a waiter at all. He was the owner of the Thornton Hotel Group, a collection of luxury properties across the country. He had more money than Natasha's entire family combined. But something held her back. No, she decided. Let's wait. Let's do this at the reception. When everyone is together. When she can't run away from it. Alexander studied her face. This isn't about revenge, is it? No. Grace meant it. It's about the truth. She needs to understand that she was wrong. Not about your bank account, but about what matters. She thinks money is everything. She needs to see that it's not. You're a better person than I am, Alexander said with a smile. I'd have told her months ago just to see her reaction. Then it's good I'm the one making this decision. Grace stood on her toes to kiss him. Besides, the surprise will be worth the wait. The photographer called them over for pictures. As Grace posed with her new husband, she caught a glimpse of the reception venue across the street. In a few hours, everything would change. Natasha would learn the truth. And Grace would finally be free of her stepsister's judgment. For now, though, she just wanted to enjoy being married to the man she loved. Even if everyone thought he was just a waiter. Especially because everyone thought he was just a waiter. 6 months earlier, Grace had been having the worst day of her career. The restaurant where she worked as a server had been slammed since noon, and it was barely 3 in the afternoon. Her feet ached, her back hurt, and she just spilled red wine on herself while trying to juggle too many tables at once. Table 12 needs water, her manager barked as Grace rushed past the kitchen. On it? The restaurant was one of those places where people went to be seen. Expensive artwork on the walls, crystal chandeliers, and a menu where nothing cost less than $40. Grace had been working there for 2 years, ever since she graduated from community college with a degree in hospitality management that hadn't led to the career she'd hoped for. She grabbed a water pitcher and headed to table 12, her mind already on the next 3 things she needed to do. Refill bread baskets. Check on table 7's entrees. Get table 3 their check. Good afternoon, she said automatically, approaching table 12 with her best professional smile. Can I get you started with some drinks? She looked up from her notepad and froze. The man sitting alone at the table was staring at her with the most intense expression she'd ever seen. Not creepy intense. Just focused like she was the only person in the room. "Hi," he said. His voice was warm. "Water is fine for now. But can I ask you something?" Grace's practice server instincts kicked in. "Of course. Do you like working here?" The question caught her off guard. Customers didn't usually ask her opinion about anything. They ordered food, ate it, paid, and left. She was part of the furniture to most of them. "It's a good job," she said carefully, giving the diplomatic answer she'd learned to give. "That's not what I asked." He leaned back in his chair. "I asked if you like it." Grace glanced around. Her manager was watching from across the room. She couldn't spend too much time at one table, especially for small talk. "It pays the bills," she said finally. "Is there anything else I can get you?" "Your honest opinion." He smiled, and something about it made Grace want to smile back. "I'm serious. I'm curious about what people really think about their jobs. Not the company line. The truth." Against her better judgment, Grace found herself answering honestly. "Some days I like it. When I get nice customers who treat me like a human being. Other days I feel invisible. Like I'm just a uniform delivering food." "Which kind of day is today?" "The second kind," Grace admitted before she could stop herself. Then she remembered who she was talking to. A customer. Someone who could complain to her manager and get her fired. No, today is fine." "Great, actually. Can I take your order?" He laughed. Not a mocking laugh. A genuine one. "Relax. I'm not going to report you. I asked a question and you gave me an honest answer. That's refreshing." "Most people don't want honest answers," Grace said. "They want to be told everything is perfect." "I'm not most people." There was something about the way he said it that made Grace believe him. She studied him more carefully now that the initial surprise had worn off. He wore jeans and a simple blue button-down shirt. Nice clothes, but nothing that screamed wealth like some of the other customers who came in wearing designer labels. "What do you do?" Grace asked, then immediately regretted it. She wasn't supposed to make personal conversation with customers. "Right now? I'm trying to decide between the salmon and the steak." "That's not what I meant." "I know." His eyes sparkled with amusement. "But if I tell you, you'll treat me differently. Everyone does. So how about this? I'll come back tomorrow, and if you're working, maybe we can talk more. Without the server-customer dynamic." "I don't even know your name," Grace pointed out. "Alexander." He held out his hand across the table. "But everyone calls me Alex." Grace hesitated, then shook his hand. "Grace. Perfect name," Alexander said. "Suits you." Over the next 2 weeks, Alexander came in every day Grace was working. He always sat in her section. Always asked her questions. Where did she grow up? What were her dreams? What made her laugh? Grace found herself looking forward to his visits. He listened when she talked. Really listened, like what she said mattered. And he was funny. Self-deprecating and clever without being mean. "You never told me what you do for work," Grace said one afternoon during a slow period. She'd brought him coffee without being asked, had learned he took it black with 1 sugar. "I work in hospitality," Alexander said vaguely. "Hotels, restaurants, that sort of thing." "That's not very specific." "I like to keep some mystery." He grinned. "Besides, I'm more interested in hearing about you. What's your family like?" Grace's smile faded. "Complicated." "Complicated how?" She shouldn't tell him. She barely knew him. But something about Alexander made her want to open up in a way she rarely did with anyone. "My mom remarried when I was 12, Grace said slowly. "His daughter Natasha is my age. We've never gotten along. She thinks I'm beneath her. That my mom and I are these poor relations who got lucky." "Are you? Poor?" "Compared to them, yes." "Lucky?" Grace shrugged. "I don't know. Sometimes I think my mom would have been happier if she'd never married him. But she loves him, so that's what matters." "What about you? Do you have anyone who loves you?" The question was gentle, but it made Grace's heart skip. "No. I had a boyfriend in college, but it didn't work out. He wanted someone more ambitious. Someone who could keep up with his career plans." "His loss," Alexander said simply. They talked until Grace's manager shot her a warning look. She needed to check on other tables. But before she left, Alexander caught her hand. "Would you want to get coffee sometime? When you're not working?" Grace knew she should say no. She didn't know anything about this man except that he came to an expensive restaurant every day and asked her personal questions. Could be a disaster. "Yes," she heard herself say. Their first real date was at a small coffee shop 3 blocks from Grace's apartment. Alexander showed up in the same casual style he always wore. Jeans, a green sweater, sneakers. Nothing fancy. They talked for 3 hours. About everything and nothing. Grace learned that Alexander had grown up in the city, that he loved old movies, that he traveled to 23 countries. She told him about her dream of running her own small bed and breakfast someday, about how she loved cooking but never had time to do it properly. Why a bed and breakfast? Alexander asked. I like the idea of creating a space where people feel at home, Grace explained. Not just a hotel where you sleep. A real place with personality and warmth. That's exactly what hospitality should be, Alexander said. But most places forget that. They focus on luxury and forget about comfort. Is that what you do? In your hospitality job? Alexander's expression shifted slightly. Something like that. Grace didn't push. If he wanted to be mysterious about his work, that was fine. She was more interested in who he was as a person. Over the next few months they fell into a pattern. Coffee dates turned into dinner dates. Dinners turned into weekend trips to nearby towns. Grace introduced him to Rachel, her best friend, who approved immediately. He's different, Rachel said after meeting Alexander. In a good way. He actually pays attention when you talk. I know, Grace agreed. It's kind of amazing. Have you told your mom about him? Not yet. Grace felt a familiar tightness in her chest. I don't want to deal with Natasha's reaction. Who cares what she thinks? My mom does. She'll want me to bring him to dinner, and then Natasha will judge him and make everyone uncomfortable. Rachel gave her a look. You can't hide him forever. She was right, of course. But Grace put off the inevitable as long as possible. She and Alexander existed in their own bubble, separate from her complicated family situation. It was Alexander who finally brought it up. They'd been dating for 4 months and things were getting serious. Grace had started keeping a toothbrush at his apartment. He had a drawer at hers. I want to meet your family, he said one evening over takeout Chinese food in Grace's living room. Grace nearly choked on her lo mein. Why? Because they're important to you. Because I want to know the people who shaped you into who you are. Trust me, you don't. Grace. Alexander set down his food and turned to face her fully. I know you're worried about what your stepsister will say. But I don't care about her opinion. I care about you. And if your family is part of your life, I want to be part of that too. Grace sighed. She's going to be horrible. Probably. She's going to judge you. Let her. She's going to make assumptions about why we're together and whether you're good enough for me. None of that matters. Alexander took her hand. I love you, Grace. I've loved you since that first day when you told me the truth about having a bad day at work. I want to be with you, and that means dealing with whatever comes, including a difficult stepsister. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. You love me? Is that really a surprise? Kind of. She laughed through the tears. I love you too. They kissed, and for a moment everything felt perfect. But Grace knew the hard part was coming. Telling her mother. Meeting her stepfamily. Watching Natasha tear apart this beautiful thing she'd found. The dinner happened 2 weeks later. Grace's mother insisted on hosting at the big house where she lived with Grace's stepfather. Natasha would be there, of course. She lived in the guest house on the property. You're nervous, Alexander observed as they pulled up to the circular driveway. Terrified, Grace corrected. It's going to be fine. It was not fine. Natasha took one look at Alexander and her lip curled. This is your boyfriend? Where did you meet him, the local diner? At the restaurant where I work, Grace said through gritted teeth. Oh, so he's a coworker. How lovely. Natasha's tone made it clear she thought it was anything but lovely. Throughout dinner, Natasha peppered Alexander with questions clearly designed to expose his lack of wealth and status. What did he do for work? Where did he live? What kind of car did he drive? Alexander answered every question with patience and humor, never rising to the bait. When Natasha asked what he did in hospitality, he simply said he managed some properties. What kind of properties? Natasha pressed. The kind with beds and restaurants, Alexander said with a straight face. Grace bit back a laugh. Technically he wasn't lying. After dinner, Grace's mother pulled her aside. He seems nice. But. Grace could hear the hesitation in her mother's voice. Natasha has some concerns. Natasha always has concerns. She just wants what's best for you. Grace felt anger bubble up. No, she doesn't. She wants me to be miserable like she is. She can't stand seeing me happy. Her mother looked pained but didn't argue. She knew it was true. When Grace and Alexander left, he turned to her in the car. That went better than expected. Really? That was better than expected. Your stepsister is exactly as bad as you described. But your mom seems nice. And your stepfather didn't say much, which I'll take as a good sign. Grace leaned her head back against the seat. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Grace, look at me. Alexander waited until she turned her head. I would deal with 1,000 Natashas if it means being with you. She doesn't matter. We matter. I love you, Grace said. I love you too. 6 weeks later, Alexander proposed. It was nothing fancy. Just the two of them at the coffee shop where they'd had their first date. He got down on one knee and asked if she'd marry him. Grace said yes before he'd even finished the question. Now here she was, married to him despite Natasha's best efforts to ruin everything. Standing outside a church, about to head to a reception where the truth would finally come out. Grace had been 12 years old when her mother first introduced her to Robert Sterling and his daughter Natasha. They'd met at a charity event where Grace's mother worked as an event coordinator. Robert was a successful real estate developer, recently widowed, with a teenage daughter who seemed nice enough at first. Grace, this is Natasha, her mother had said brightly. You two are the same age. I thought maybe you could be friends. Natasha had looked Grace up and down with an expression that would become painfully familiar over the years. Cool assessment followed by dismissal. Hi, Natasha had said without enthusiasm before turning back to her phone. That should have been Grace's first clue. Her mother and Robert dated for a year before getting engaged. During that time, Grace watched her mother transform. She started wearing more expensive clothes, changed her hair, began talking about things like country clubs and charity galas. It was like she was trying to become someone else entirely. Are you happy? Grace had asked her mother one evening while they packed boxes in preparation for moving into Robert's house. Of course I am, her mother had replied. Robert is wonderful. And you'll love living in the big house. You'll have your own bathroom, can you imagine? Grace didn't care about having her own bathroom. She cared about the way Natasha looked at her and her mother, like they were intruders in her perfect life. The wedding had been huge. 300 guests at a fancy hotel. Grace wore a lavender dress that Natasha had loudly declared was ugly. Robert's family attended in force, making it clear through subtle comments and cold shoulders that they didn't approve of his choice to marry someone so far beneath his social standing. Moving into the Sterling house was even worse. It was a massive property with 6 bedrooms, a pool, and grounds that required a full-time gardener. Grace's mother seemed thrilled. Grace felt like she was living in a museum where she wasn't allowed to touch anything. Natasha had the entire 3rd floor to herself. Her room was twice the size of the apartment Grace and her mother had shared before. She had a walk-in closet full of designer clothes, a bathroom with a jacuzzi tub, and furniture that probably cost more than Grace's mother made in a year. Grace got a nice room on the 2nd floor. Smaller than Natasha's but still nicer than anything she'd ever had. Her mother bought her new bedding and curtains trying to make it feel like home. But it never did. This is temporary, Natasha had informed Grace the first week. My dad always gets tired of his girlfriends eventually. Your mom will be gone by Christmas. Christmas came and went. Grace's mother stayed. Natasha's resentment grew. School became a nightmare. Natasha went to an expensive private academy where she'd been since kindergarten. Grace's mother wanted her to transfer there too, but Robert said it was too expensive for both girls. So Grace stayed at her public school while Natasha enjoyed small classes and trips to Europe. It's not fair that I have to share my dad with you, Natasha said one afternoon when Robert was taking them both to the mall. He was mine first. I don't want to share him, Grace had replied honestly. You can have him. I just want my mom to be happy. Well, my happiness matters more. That became the pattern. Natasha's needs always came first. When money was tight, Grace's mother would quietly pay for Grace's expenses out of her own salary so Robert wouldn't have to. When both girls wanted to do activities, Natasha's choice won. When college applications came around, Natasha got a private counselor while Grace used the free one at school. The worst part was watching her mother pretend not to notice. She'd worked so hard to fit into Robert's world that she'd stopped fighting for Grace. Every time Grace tried to talk to her about how Natasha treated her, her mother would make excuses. She's adjusting to having a stepfamily. Give her time. She's under a lot of pressure at school. Try to understand. She doesn't mean it the way it sounds. She's actually very sweet once you get to know her. Grace stopped trying to get her mother to see the truth. It was easier to just endure Natasha's constant criticism and wait for the day she could move out. College had been Grace's escape plan. She'd applied to schools across the country, dreaming of putting distance between herself and her stepsister. But the reality was that she couldn't afford most of them. Her mother couldn't help financially, and Robert made it clear that while he'd pay for Natasha's expensive private university, Grace was on her own. "It's not that I don't want to help," he'd said, not meeting her eyes. "But I have to prioritize my own daughter. I'm sure you understand." Grace had understood perfectly. She attended community college while living at home and working 2 jobs. It took her 5 years to get a degree that most people finished in 4, but she did it without taking on debt. She was proud of that, even if Natasha mocked her for going to a lesser school. The hospitality management degree hadn't led to the career Grace had hoped for. She'd applied to dozens of hotel management positions, but none of them hired her. She suspected that without connections or an internship at a prestigious property, she was never going to break into the industry the way she wanted. So she'd ended up serving tables at the same type of high-end restaurant she'd hoped to manage someday. It paid better than most serving jobs and she was good at it. But it felt like failure every time Natasha asked what she was doing with her degree. "Still waiting tables?" Natasha would say with false sympathy. "That's such a shame. All that education and you're right back where you started." Grace moved out of the Sterling house 2 years after college. She found a small studio apartment in a decent neighborhood and furnished it with second-hand finds and creativity. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Natasha had visited exactly once, spent 10 minutes critiquing everything from the size to the location, and never came back. "I don't know how you live like this," Natasha had said, wrinkling her nose at the Murphy bed. "I'd rather die than live in a place this small." "Good thing you don't have to then," Grace had replied. Her mother visited more often, usually when Robert was traveling for business and Natasha was busy with her social calendar. She'd bring groceries or small gifts, things Grace didn't really need but accepted because it made her mother happy. "I'm proud of you," her mother would say. "You're so independent." What she meant was, "I'm sorry I can't help you more. I'm sorry I chose this life that doesn't have room for you the way it should." Grace understood, but it still hurt. Meeting Alexander had changed everything. For the first time since her mother had married Robert, Grace had something in her life that was entirely her own. Something good that Natasha couldn't touch or ruin. Except Natasha tried anyway. When Grace told her mother she was dating someone, Natasha had immediately started asking questions. What did he do? Where did he live? What kind of family did he come from? When Grace said he worked in hospitality, Natasha's face had lit up with malicious glee. "Oh, so he's in the same dead-end career as you. How perfect." The dinner where Grace introduced Alexander to her family had been worse than she'd expected. Natasha had been openly hostile, making comments about Alexander's clothes, his car, his apparent lack of ambition. Grace's stepfather had been coldly polite, clearly taking his daughter's side. Only Grace's mother had tried to make Alexander feel welcome. After that dinner, Natasha ramped up her campaign to break them up. She'd call Grace with job listings for better opportunities that just happened to be in other cities. She'd make comments about how Grace deserved someone who could provide for her properly. She'd send articles about the importance of financial compatibility in relationships. Grace ignored all of it. She and Alexander were happy. That was what mattered. But when Grace got engaged, Natasha's disapproval reached new heights. She'd actually called Grace to try to talk her out of it. "You're making a huge mistake," Natasha had said. "This man can't give you the life you deserve." "What life do I deserve?" Grace had asked. "One like yours where I have money but no genuine connections. Where people are only nice to me because of my bank account. Better than being poor and in love. Love doesn't last, Grace. Money does." "Is that what your father taught you?" Natasha had hung up on her. The wedding planning had been tense. Grace's mother wanted to help but couldn't contribute much financially. Robert offered nothing. Natasha made it clear she thought the entire event was a joke and that she'd only attend out of obligation to her father. Grace and Alexander had planned a small, simple wedding. They didn't need anything elaborate. Just their closest friends and family, good food, and a celebration of their commitment to each other. Natasha had still found ways to criticize. The venue was too small. The flowers were cheap. The invitations were tacky. Grace had stopped responding to her messages 2 weeks before the wedding, unable to deal with the constant negativity. And then came the wedding day itself. The interruption. The public humiliation. The cruel words that everyone heard. Standing outside the church now, watching the photographer arrange people for group shots, Grace felt the weight of all those years of dealing with Natasha's judgment. All the time she'd stayed quiet, all the insults she'd swallowed, all the ways she'd made herself smaller to avoid conflict. Not anymore. Today Natasha would learn the truth. And Grace would finally be free of her stepsister's hold over her. Alexander touched her arm. You ready to head to the reception? Grace looked at her new husband. At the man who loved her not for what she had or who she knew, but for who she was. The man who'd kept his wealth secret because he wanted to be sure she loved him for the right reasons. The man who'd endured Natasha's insults without ever losing his cool. I'm ready, Grace said. The reception venue was beautiful despite its modest budget. White lights strung across the ceiling. Simple centerpieces of wildflowers. A small dance floor and a DJ instead of a band. Everything Grace had wanted. Guests began arriving, filling the space with laughter and conversation. Grace's friends from work clustered near the bar. Rachel was helping the caterer set up the buffet. Alexander's friends, carefully dressed down to match the casual atmosphere, mingled comfortably. Grace's mother arrived looking nervous. Behind her came Robert and Natasha. I wasn't sure they'd come, Grace murmured to Alexander. Of course they came, Alexander replied. Natasha wouldn't miss the chance to gloat about you marrying the poor waiter. Grace felt a flutter of anticipation in her stomach. In less than an hour, everything would change. She just had to wait for the right moment. The moment when the truth would finally come out. The reception was in full swing when Grace noticed the first crack in Natasha's certainty. Her stepsister stood near the bar, looking around the room with her usual expression of disdain, when a tall man in an expensive suit approached her. Excuse me, the man said. You're Natasha Sterling, right? Robert Sterling's daughter? Natasha's face lit up with the fake smile she used when networking. I am. And you are? Thomas Reeves. I work in commercial real estate. I've done some deals with your father. Oh, how nice. Natasha glanced back at the reception, clearly uninterested in small talk. I didn't realize my father had business associates attending today. I'm not here for your father, Thomas said. I'm here for Alex. We went to business school together. Natasha's smile froze. Alex? Alexander Thornton. The groom. Thomas gestured toward where Alexander stood talking with a group of guests. We've stayed close over the years. Great guy. Smart as they come. I'm sorry, Natasha said slowly. Did you say business school? Harvard. Class of 2016. Thomas pulled out his phone. Here I have pictures from graduation. That was a wild weekend. He showed Natasha the screen. Grace couldn't see it from where she stood, but she could see Natasha's face go pale. There must be some mistake, Natasha said. Alexander works as a waiter. Thomas laughed. A waiter? Alex? No, he runs the Thornton Hotel Group. Has for about 5 years now. You didn't know? Grace watched as understanding dawned on Natasha's face, quickly followed by horror. Her stepsister's mouth opened and closed without sound. Thomas, oblivious to the bomb he just dropped, kept talking. The company's doing incredibly well. They just opened a new property in Miami last month. Gorgeous place. Alex gave me the tour. You should see the presidential suite, it's like something from a magazine. Thornton Hotel Group, Natasha repeated faintly. You've heard of it then? They have properties in 12 states now. Luxury market mostly. Very high end. Thomas smiled. I'm surprised Grace didn't mention it. Then again, Alex always was private about his work. Says he likes to know people see him as more than just his bank account. Natasha made a strangled sound. Anyway, nice to meet you. Thomas wandered off toward the buffet table, leaving Natasha standing alone with her shock. Grace turned to Alexander. Did you arrange that? No, Alexander said, though his eyes sparkled with amusement. But I'm not sorry it happened. Should we make the official announcement? Not yet, Grace said. Let her stew a bit longer. Over the next 30 minutes, Grace watched with satisfaction as more people approached Natasha. A woman who'd done legal work for the Thornton Hotel Group. A man who supplied linens to all of Alexander's properties. A restaurant owner who'd consulted with Alexander on opening her own place. Each conversation left Natasha looking more horrified. She kept glancing at Alexander, then at Grace, clearly trying to process what she was learning. Grace's stepfather had noticed something was wrong and was trying to get Natasha to tell him what happened, but she seemed unable to form words. Finally, it was time for toast. Rachel stood up first as maid of honor, and gave a sweet speech about friendship and finding true love. Alexander's best friend spoke next, cracking jokes and sharing embarrassing stories from college that made everyone laugh. Then Alexander stood up with his glass of champagne. The room fell quiet. I want to thank everyone for being here today, Alexander began. Grace and I are so grateful to celebrate with all of you. But before we move on to dinner, I need to address something that happened earlier today. Grace saw Natasha sit up straighter in her chair. Her stepfather looked confused. During our ceremony, someone interrupted to express concern about our marriage. Alexander's voice remained pleasant, but there was an edge to it now. The concern was primarily financial in nature. Worries about whether I could support my wife properly. A murmur went through the crowd. Most people had heard about Natasha's outburst. I let those concerns stand because Grace asked me to, Alexander continued. She wanted to wait until now to clear things up. So, for anyone who was worried about our financial future, let me put those concerns to rest. He clicked a button on his phone, and a projector screen descended from the ceiling. Grace hadn't known he'd arranged this part. On the screen appeared the logo for the Thornton Hotel Group, followed by a series of images. Luxury hotels in various cities. Elegant restaurants. Spas and conference centers. I don't work as a waiter, Alexander said. I own the restaurant where Grace and I met, along with 16 other fine dining establishments. I also own the Thornton Hotel Group, which operates 32 luxury properties across the United States. The room erupted in gasps and excited conversation. Grace watched Natasha's face go from pale to red. Her stepsister looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. Now, why did I keep this information private? Alexander looked directly at Grace with such warmth that she felt tears prick her eyes. Because I wanted to know that the woman I fell in love with loved me for who I am, not what I have. I wanted our relationship to be built on something real. He held out his hand and Grace stood to join him at the front of the room. Grace never cared about money, Alexander said. She cared about kindness, honesty, and building a real connection. She saw me as a person, not a bank account. That's why I love her. That's why I married her. And that's why I'm standing here today as the luckiest man alive. He kissed her while the room exploded in applause. Grace heard Rachel whooping loudly from across the room. When she opened her eyes and looked toward where Natasha sat, she saw her stepsister and stepfather whispering urgently to each other. Natasha looked absolutely stricken. There's more, Alexander said once the applause died down. Grace, I know you've always dreamed of running your own bed and breakfast. So, as a wedding gift, I bought the old Victorian house on Maple Street. The one you showed me 6 months ago and said would be perfect. Grace's hands flew to her mouth. You didn't. I did. It's ours. We can renovate it together and open it however you want. Your vision, your rules. I'll help however I can, but this is your dream and I want to support it. This time Grace was the one who kissed him. Through her tears she could see Rachel crying too. Her mother looked stunned but happy. And Natasha looked like she'd just been slapped. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of congratulations and excitement. People kept coming up to Grace to tell her how happy they were for her, how romantic the whole story was, how lucky she was to have found someone who valued her so much. Grace noticed Natasha trying to leave early, but her father stopped her. Robert looked grim as he steered his daughter toward where Grace and Alexander stood greeting guests. Grace, Robert said stiffly. Alexander. Congratulations on your marriage. Thank you, Grace said, her voice cool. I wonder if Natasha has something she'd like to say. Robert's hand was tight on his daughter's arm. Natasha looked like she'd rather eat glass, but she forced out words. I apologize for the disruption during the ceremony. It was inappropriate. It was cruel, Grace corrected. You tried to humiliate me in front of everyone I care about. You called me pathetic for marrying someone you thought was beneath me. I didn't know, Natasha said weakly. Know what? That Alexander is wealthy? That's exactly the point, Natasha. You judged our entire relationship based on what you thought his bank account looked like. You never considered that I might actually love him. That he might actually be a good person worth marrying regardless of his job. I was trying to help you. No, you weren't. Grace felt years of resentment bubbling up. You were trying to prove that you're better than me. That your life is superior because you have money and I don't. Well, guess what? I don't need money to be happy. I need people who love and respect me. Something you've never done. Grace, her mother said softly, appearing at her elbow. Maybe this isn't the time. Actually, this is the perfect time. Grace turned to her mother. Mom, I love you. But I'm done pretending that Natasha's behavior is acceptable. I'm done making myself smaller so she can feel bigger. I'm done. She looked at Natasha. You're not invited into my life anymore. Not my home, not my marriage, not my future. I don't need your approval or your opinion. I just need you to leave me alone. Natasha's face went through several expressions. Shock, anger, hurt, and finally something that might have been understanding. Fine, she said. I don't need to be part of your life anyway. Good. We finally agree on something. Robert cleared his throat. Grace, I think you're being unfair. Natasha made a mistake, but family should forgive. She's not my family, Grace said flatly. She's never been my family. She made that clear from the day we met. You're my mother's husband and I'm polite to you because of her. But that's where my obligation ends. She watched as the truth of her words hit Robert. He'd known, of course, how Natasha treated her. He just never cared enough to do anything about it. His daughter's happiness had always mattered more than his stepdaughter's comfort. I think it's time for you to leave, Alexander said quietly. His tone was polite but firm. This is our wedding reception. You've said your piece. Now please go. Robert looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Alexander's expression stopped him. He nodded curtly, took Natasha's arm and steered her toward the exit. Grace watched them go, feeling lighter than she had in years. Her mother stood beside her, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, her mother whispered. I should have protected you better. I should have stood up for you more. You did the best you could, Grace said. And she meant it. Her mother had been trying to survive in a situation that was never easy. Grace couldn't blame her for that. But I'm done now, her mother continued. Watching Natasha today, seeing how she treated you. It opened my eyes. Robert has always let her get away with everything, and I've enabled it by staying quiet. No more. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm leaving him. Her mother wiped her eyes. I've been unhappy for a long time. I stayed because I thought it was the right thing to do. Because I thought maybe things would get better. But they won't. And I'd rather be alone than stay in a marriage where my daughter isn't welcome. Grace hugged her mother tightly. You can stay with us. We have plenty of room. I have some money saved, her mother said. I'll find my own place. But thank you. And I'm so proud of you, Grace. You found real love. You didn't compromise. You didn't settle. I learned it from you, Grace said. You always told me to hold out for someone who treats me right. I just wish you'd followed your own advice sooner. They held each other while the party continued around them. Rachel appeared with tissues and more champagne. Alexander wrapped his arms around both of them, creating a small circle of the people who actually mattered. Speech. Someone called from the crowd. Let the bride talk. Grace took the microphone that Rachel handed her. She looked out at the faces of people who'd shown up to celebrate with her. Her real friends. Her real family. The people who'd supported her through everything. I just want to say thank you, Grace began. To everyone who's here tonight. You all believed in me and in my relationship with Alexander even when it seemed impossible. You saw what really mattered. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Someone asked me recently if I regretted my choices. If I wished I'd taken an easier path, found someone with obvious wealth and status. The answer is no. Because what I have with Alexander is real. It's based on honesty and respect and genuine care for each other. That's worth more than any amount of money. The crowd cheered. Grace handed the microphone back and returned to Alexander's side. You okay? He asked. I'm perfect, Grace said. And for the first time in a very long time, she meant it. The morning after the wedding, Grace woke up in a hotel suite so luxurious it took her a moment to remember where she was. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The bed was so soft she'd sunk into it like a cloud. Alexander was already awake, sitting on the balcony with coffee and a newspaper. Morning, he called when he saw her stirring. Grace wrapped herself in the plush robe hanging in the bathroom and joined him outside. Is this one of your properties? Our properties now, Alexander corrected with a smile. And yes, the presidential suite at the Thornton Grand. I thought we should spend our wedding night somewhere special. It's beautiful. Grace accepted the coffee he poured for her. I still can't believe all of this is real. Which part? The marriage or the money? Both maybe. Grace settled into the chair beside him. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out it was all a dream. It's real, Alexander assured her. And we should probably talk about what it means practically. For your life. For our future. Grace nodded. She'd been avoiding thinking about the logistics of suddenly being married to one of the wealthiest men in the state. Everything was about to change and she wasn't sure she was ready. I don't want to quit my job, she said suddenly. Alexander raised an eyebrow. You still want to wait tables? No, not that. But I don't want to just suddenly stop working. I like having purpose. I like earning my own money. You won't have to work if you don't want to, Alexander said carefully. But if you do want to work, we can figure that out. What do you want to do? I want to work on the bed and breakfast, Grace said. You said you bought the Victorian house. Can we really renovate it? Absolutely. It needs a lot of work, but that's part of the fun. You can design every room, choose every detail. Make it exactly what you've always envisioned. Grace felt excitement building in her chest. How soon can we start? As soon as you want. I've already had some contractors look at it. The bones are good, but the electrical and plumbing need updating. We'll need to gut the kitchen. Replace all the bathrooms. But the structure itself is solid. They spent the next hour discussing plans. Grace pulled out her phone and started showing Alexander ideas she'd been collecting for years. Paint colors, furniture styles, themes for different rooms. He listened to everything, asking questions and offering suggestions without ever trying to take over. You really meant it, Grace said. When you said this would be my project. I really meant it. I have enough hotels to manage. This one is yours. I'll help with whatever you need, but the vision is all you. Grace leaned over and kissed him. I love you. I love you too. Now, we should probably talk about the other elephant in the room. Natasha. Natasha, Alexander agreed. She's going to be a problem. She already is a problem. Grace sighed. Did you see her face when you made the announcement? I saw. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Alexander set down his coffee. The question is what happens next. She's not going to just accept being wrong and move on. Grace knew he was right. Natasha had never admitted fault in her entire life. She'd find some way to twist the situation, to make herself the victim or to minimize Grace's happiness. Let her try, Grace said. I meant what I said last night. She's not welcome in my life anymore. What about your mother? That was the complicated part. Grace's mother had said she was leaving Robert, but talk was different from action. People said they'd make changes all the time and then didn't follow through. Grace wanted to believe her mother would finally stand up for herself, but years of experience made her cautious. We'll see, Grace said. If she really leaves Robert, then we'll support her. If she doesn't, then I'll keep my distance from both of them. Alexander nodded. Fair enough. What about social situations? Robert moves in the same business circles I do. We're likely to run into him and Natasha at events. Grace hadn't considered that. In her mind, cutting Natasha out meant never seeing her again. But of course it wouldn't be that simple. Not when Alexander was prominent in the community. We'll be polite but distant, Grace decided. We don't need to be rude. We just need to make it clear that we're not interested in having a relationship with them. I can work with that. They spent the rest of the day in the hotel suite, ordering room service and watching old movies. It felt like a luxury just to have uninterrupted time together. No work schedules to coordinate around. No family drama to deal with. Just the two of them. Grace's phone buzzed repeatedly throughout the day. Rachel texting photos from the reception. Her mother calling to check in. Other friends sending congratulations. Grace answered the important ones and ignored the rest. Until Natasha's name appeared on her screen. Don't answer it, Alexander said when he saw Grace staring at the phone. I'm not going to, Grace said. But she was curious what her stepsister wanted. The call went to voicemail and a minute later a text appeared. We need to talk. Please call me. Grace showed the text to Alexander. What do you think she wants? To make excuses. To try to smooth things over. Maybe to see if there's a way to benefit from your new situation. That last possibility made Grace's stomach turn. Of course Natasha would see this as an opportunity. Alexander's wealth meant connections, business opportunities, social advancement. All the things Natasha valued. I'm not calling her back, Grace said firmly. Good. Another text arrived. Grace, please. I'm sorry. Let me explain. Now she's sorry, Grace said. Not when she crashed my wedding. Not when she called me pathetic in front of everyone. Now that she knows Alexander has money, suddenly she's sorry. You don't owe her anything, Alexander reminded her. Not your time, not your forgiveness, nothing. Grace deleted both texts without responding. Within 5 minutes, another message appeared, this time from Robert. Grace, your sister is very upset. I think you should talk to her. Family is important. My sister, Grace read aloud. He's calling her my sister now. As if we've ever been sisters in any meaningful way. Alexander took the phone from her hands and turned it off. Enough. This is our honeymoon even if it's just one night in a hotel. They don't get to intrude. He was right. Grace let him distract her with more movies, more food, and eventually with the kind of attention that made her forget about everything except being with him. But the next morning reality came crashing back. They returned to Grace's apartment to pack up her things. She'd be moving into Alexander's house, a place she'd only visited a few times. He kept his real home separate from their relationship, wanting to maintain the illusion that he was just a regular guy with a regular life. The house was stunning. A modern design with clean lines and huge windows. It sat on 2 acres of landscaped property with a pool, a greenhouse, and a separate garage building. Grace walked through the rooms feeling overwhelmed. "This is too much," she said. "It's just a house," Alexander replied. "And now it's our house. You can change anything you want. Redecorate completely if you'd like." Grace touched the expensive furniture, the original artwork on the walls, the state-of-the-art kitchen. Everything was beautiful but impersonal. Like a magazine spread instead of a home. "I'd like to make it more comfortable," she said finally. "Less like a showroom and more like a place where people actually live." "Then that's what we'll do." They spent the afternoon discussing changes. Grace wanted plants everywhere. Real books on the shelves instead of decorative ones. Comfortable furniture for curling up on, not just pieces that looked good. Photos of people they loved instead of generic art. "Basically, you want to make it feel like a home," Alexander summarized. "Exactly. I love it. Let's do it." Grace was measuring windows for new curtains when her phone rang. It was her mother. "I did it," her mother said without preamble. "I left Robert. I'm staying with Aunt Lisa right now." Grace sat down hard on the sofa. "You really left?" "I really left. I took my things this morning while he was at work. Left him a note. I just couldn't stay there anymore, not after seeing how Natasha treated you." "How did he react?" "He called me 17 times. I finally answered and told him I wasn't coming back. He tried to convince me I was overreacting, that Natasha just needed time, that I was throwing away our life together over one incident." "It wasn't one incident," Grace said. "I know. I told him that too. I said I'd spent 10 years watching my daughter be treated like she didn't matter and I was done. He didn't take it well." Grace felt a surge of pride mixed with worry. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" "I need a lawyer to file for divorce. And I need to figure out where I'm going to live. But otherwise I'm actually feeling good. Lighter, somehow." "Move in with us," Grace said impulsively. "We have plenty of space. You can stay as long as you need." "Grace, I can't do that. You're newlyweds. And you're my mother. Alexander won't mind." "Hold on." She turned to Alexander, who'd been listening. He nodded immediately. "Tell her we insist," Alexander said. "We have 4 guest rooms. She can have her pick." Grace relayed the message. Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Come over tonight. Bring whatever you have. We'll figure out the rest later." After hanging up, Grace looked at Alexander. "Thank you." "She's family," he said simply. "Real family. Not the kind that only shows up when it's convenient." Grace's mother arrived that evening with 3 suitcases and a cardboard box of personal items. She looked tired but determined. Alexander helped her carry everything upstairs to a guest room with an attached bathroom and a view of the garden. "This is too much," Grace's mother said, echoing Grace's earlier words. "It's just right," Alexander replied. "Stay as long as you need. There's no rush." Over dinner, Grace's mother told them more about the conversation with Robert. He'd been shocked by her leaving, couldn't understand why she was so upset. He tried to blame Grace for causing problems, for being ungrateful, for driving a wedge between them. "I told him the wedge was already there," Grace's mother said. "I just finally opened my eyes to see it. He didn't like that." "What about Natasha?" Grace asked. Furious. "She called me screaming about how I was abandoning the family, how I was choosing you over them. I told her there was no choosing involved. I was choosing myself for the first time in 10 years. Grace reached across the table to squeeze her mother's hand. "I'm proud of you. I should have done it years ago. I'm sorry it took so long. You did it now. That's what matters." The 3 of them sat in the kitchen talking until late. Grace's mother shared stories about her marriage to Robert that she'd never told before. The small slights, the constant feeling of being less than, the way Natasha's needs always came first. It all poured out, years of resentment finally given voice. "I thought I could make it work," her mother said. "I thought if I just tried hard enough, if I made myself fit into their world, eventually they'd accept us. But they never did." "Some people won't accept you no matter what you do," Alexander said. "It's not worth changing yourself to please them. I wish I'd learned that lesson sooner." Grace felt a pang of sadness for her mother. 10 years of trying to belong somewhere she was never truly welcome. But there was also hope. Her mother was free now. They both were. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity. Grace's mother met with a divorce lawyer. Grace and Alexander toured the Victorian house with contractors, making plans for the renovation. And Grace gave notice at the restaurant where she'd been working. Her manager was sorry to see her go but not surprised. "I figured something was up when that guy kept coming in every day asking for your section," he said with a grin. "Turns out he was worth more than all our regular customers combined." "He tipped well," Grace said. "He tipped incredible." The rest of the staff was jealous. On Grace's last day of work, the team threw her a small party. Rachel made a cake shaped like a hotel. Everyone had signed a card with silly messages and good wishes. Grace felt emotional saying goodbye to people she'd worked alongside for 2 years. "You deserve this," Rachel told her as they hugged goodbye. "You've always been too good for this place." "I liked working here," Grace said honestly. "But you'll like running your own place more. And you'll be amazing at it." Grace hoped she was right. The bed and breakfast felt like a huge undertaking. What if she failed? What if her vision didn't translate into reality? What if nobody wanted to stay there? As if reading her mind, Alexander appeared at her side. "Stop worrying." "I'm not worrying. You're making your worried face." "I have a worried face?" You scrunch up your nose a little. "It's cute, but it means you're overthinking something." Grace laughed despite herself. "Okay, fine. I'm worried. What if the bed and breakfast is a disaster?" "Then we'll figure it out together," Alexander said. "But it's not going to be a disaster. You have great instincts, you understand what makes a place feel welcoming, and you actually care about the experience people have. That's more important than anything else." He was right. Grace took a deep breath and let go of the worry. Or at least most of it. That evening, as they drove home with boxes of Grace's belongings from the restaurant, Alexander's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's my lawyer," he said. "I should take this." He pulled over and answered. Grace watched his expression change from curious to serious to angry. When he hung up, his jaw was tight. "What happened?" Grace asked. "Robert Sterling just filed a lawsuit against the Thornton Hotel Group," Alexander said. "He's claiming I've been using my position to manipulate his stepdaughter into marriage for financial gain." Grace felt the air leave her lungs. "He's what?" "He's claiming you're entitled to his property in the divorce from your mother, and that I married you to get access to it through you. It's complete garbage, but it's going to be messy to defend against." "That's insane. My mother doesn't have claim to any of his property. And I certainly don't." "I know. But he's trying to cause problems. Probably at Natasha's urging." Alexander started driving again. "Don't worry. My lawyer says it'll get thrown out quickly. But it's going to be unpleasant for a while." Grace felt anger building in her chest. This was exactly what Natasha did. When she couldn't win, she burned everything down around her. When she couldn't control the situation, she created chaos. "Let them try," Grace said. "We have nothing to hide." But as they drove home through the darkening streets, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Natasha wasn't done causing problems. Not by a long shot. The lawsuit was thrown out within 2 weeks, just as Alexander's lawyer had predicted. The judge called it frivolous and warned Robert that any further legal actions of this nature would result in sanctions. But the damage was done. The local business community buzzed with gossip. Some people believed Robert's accusations. Others defended Alexander. A few prominent families quietly distanced themselves from both parties, not wanting to be caught up in the drama. Grace tried to ignore it all and focus on the bed and breakfast renovations. The contractors had started work on the Victorian house, and she spent most days there making decisions about finishes and fixtures. It was exactly the kind of project she'd always dreamed about, but the lawsuit had soured some of the joy. "You can't let them get to you," Rachel said one afternoon as they picked out paint colors. "That's what they want. They want to make you miserable." "I know," Grace said. "But it's hard to ignore when people are talking about you everywhere you go. So don't go anywhere for a while. Stay here, work on this beautiful house, and let the gossip die down." It was good advice, but Grace felt like she was hiding. And she hated that feeling. 3 weeks after the lawsuit was dismissed, Natasha showed up at the Victorian house. Grace was alone, discussing tile options with the contractor, when she heard the front door open. "Hello." Natasha's voice echoed through the empty first floor. "Grace? Are you here?" Grace considered not answering. But that felt cowardly. She excused herself from the contractor and went to the front hallway. Natasha stood in the doorway looking nothing like her usual polished self. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweatshirt instead of designer clothes. No makeup. She looked, Grace realized with surprise, like she'd been crying. What do you want? Grace asked. To apologize. Properly this time. Natasha stepped inside without being invited. This place is amazing. Is this your bed and breakfast? Yes. And you're not welcome here. I know. I know I've been terrible. But please, just give me 5 minutes to explain. Grace wanted to say no. Wanted to throw Natasha out and lock the door behind her. But something in her stepsister's expression stopped her. She looked genuinely broken. 5 minutes, Grace said. Then you leave. Natasha nodded. She walked further into the house, looking around at the renovation in progress. You always had good taste. Better than me, honestly. I just bought whatever was expensive. But this has personality. For minutes, Grace said. Right. Okay. Natasha took a breath. I'm sorry. Not just for the wedding but for everything. Years of being cruel to you and your mom. Years of treating you like you were less than me. I was wrong. You were, Grace agreed. Why are you here now? What changed? Everything changed. My dad cut me off financially. He said I embarrassed him with my behavior at your wedding and then made it worse with the lawsuit. He's not paying my rent anymore or my credit cards. I had to move back into his house and your mom isn't there to mediate between us. We fight constantly. So you're sorry because you're facing consequences? Grace said flatly. No. I mean, yes, partially. But also because I've had time to think about who I've become and I hate it. Natasha's voice cracked. I look at you and Alexander and you have something real. Something I've never had. All my relationships have been transactional. People dated me for my dad's money or my connections. Nobody ever loved me the way Alexander obviously loves you. Grace felt a flicker of sympathy but pushed it down. That's not my problem to solve. I know. I'm not asking you to solve it. I'm just trying to explain why I was so awful. I was jealous. You found something authentic and I couldn't stand it. So I tried to ruin it. You tried to humiliate me in public, Grace corrected. You called me pathetic. You mocked my husband. You convinced your father to file a baseless lawsuit. I know. And I regret all of it. Natasha sat down on a paint-splattered tarp, not seeming to care about her clothes. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Grace studied her stepsister. This felt different from the forced apology at the wedding reception. Natasha seemed genuinely remorseful. But Grace had been fooled before. What do you want from me? Grace asked. Nothing. I don't want anything except for you to know that I'm sorry. And maybe, someday if you can ever forgive me we could start over. Not as sisters but as people who share a complicated history and want to move past it. I don't trust you, Grace said honestly. I don't blame you. I wouldn't trust me either. Natasha stood up. I'll go now. Thank you for listening. She walked toward the door then stopped. For what it's worth, Alexander seems like a really good guy. You chose well. Then she was gone, leaving Grace standing in the hallway feeling confused. That had not gone the way she'd expected. The contractor poked his head out of the bathroom. Everything okay? I think so, Grace said. Let's get back to those tile options. But she couldn't focus on tiles anymore. Her mind kept replaying the conversation with Natasha. Had her stepsister really changed? Or was this just another manipulation? That evening, Grace told Alexander and her mother about the visit. They were in the kitchen making dinner together, something that had become a nightly ritual since Grace's mother had moved in. What do you think she's playing at? Alexander asked. I don't know if she's playing at anything, Grace's mother said quietly. Robert has been very hard on her since I left. She's lost a lot of her social status. Her friends have mostly abandoned her. Good, Grace said then felt guilty. That sounds mean. It's not mean, her mother replied. It's a natural consequence of her actions. But it doesn't mean she's incapable of growing. People can change. Do you think she's changed? Grace asked. Her mother considered the question while chopping vegetables. I think she's been forced to confront some truths about herself. Whether that leads to actual change remains to be seen. Alexander was less optimistic. She could be trying to get back into your good graces so she has access to our resources and connections. Be careful. Grace knew he was right to be cautious. But she also couldn't shake the image of Natasha looking so defeated and vulnerable. It was a side of her stepsister she'd never seen before. Over the next few weeks, Natasha tried to reach out several more times. Small gestures, nothing dramatic. A text apologizing again. A bouquet of flowers delivered to the Victorian house with a card that said, "Good luck with your dream." A donation to a charity Grace supported, made in Grace's name. Grace didn't respond to any of it. She wasn't ready to engage, wasn't sure she'd ever be ready. But the gestures kept coming. Meanwhile, the bed and breakfast renovations progressed beautifully. The electrical and plumbing were updated. The kitchen was gutted and rebuilt with commercial-grade appliances. The bathrooms were transformed into spa-like retreats. Grace spent hours selecting furniture, linens, and artwork for each of the 6 guest rooms. "This is going to be spectacular," the contractor said one day as they surveyed the finished master bedroom. "People are going to love staying here." Grace hoped he was right. They poured so much work and money into the project. The grand opening was scheduled for 3 months away, and she was already nervous about it. Alexander had been supportive throughout the entire process, offering advice when asked but never taking over. He'd connected Grace with some suppliers he worked with for his own properties, which saved money without compromising quality. He'd also helped her develop a business plan and marketing strategy. "You're treating this like a real business," Grace observed one evening as they reviewed financial projections. "It is a real business," Alexander replied. "Just because I'm funding it doesn't mean it's not legitimate. You're putting in the work. You're making the decisions. This is yours." Grace leaned over and kissed him. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" "Not in the last hour or so." "I love you. I love you too." Grace's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it and sighed. "Natasha again?" Alexander guessed. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess." Grace read the message. "My dad is in the hospital. Heart attack. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I thought you should know. Your mom will probably want to see him." Grace showed the text to Alexander. "Do you think it's real? Call your mom and find out." Grace's mother confirmed that Robert had indeed had a heart attack. Natasha had called her directly, and she was planning to go to the hospital. "Do you want me to come with you?" Grace asked. Her mother hesitated. "Only if you want to. I know you don't owe Robert anything." Grace didn't owe him anything. But she loved her mother, and her mother was clearly upset. "I'll come." At the hospital, they found Natasha in the waiting room looking exhausted and scared. She stood when she saw them, relief flooding her face. "Thank you for coming," she said to Grace's mother, then looked at Grace. "Thank you too. I know you didn't have to." "How is he?" Grace's mother asked. "Stable. They did surgery to put in a stent. The doctor says he'll recover, but he needs to make lifestyle changes." Grace's mother went to find the doctor for more information, leaving Grace alone with Natasha. They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. "You didn't have to come," Natasha said finally. "I wouldn't have blamed you if you'd stayed away." "I came for my mom, not for him," Grace said. "But I'm glad he's going to be okay." "I've been thinking a lot lately about what's important," Natasha said. "Seeing him in that hospital bed, I realized how much time I've wasted on stupid things. Status, money, impressing people who don't actually care about me. None of it matters when you're facing real problems." Grace didn't know what to say to that. It sounded sincere, but she was still wary. "I'm moving out of my dad's house," Natasha continued. "Getting my own place. A small apartment I can actually afford on my own. I got a job at a marketing firm. Entry level, nothing glamorous. But it's mine." "Good for you," Grace said and meant it. "I'm trying to figure out who I am without his money," Natasha said. "It's harder than I expected. But also kind of freeing. I don't have to be the perfect daughter anymore. I can just be me." "Who is that?" Grace asked. "Who are you without all the other stuff?" Natasha laughed bitterly. "I'm still figuring that out. But I'm hoping she's better than the person I've been." Grace's mother returned with an update. Robert was asking for her. Natasha stood to go with her, then looked at Grace. "I don't expect us to be friends," Natasha said. "But maybe someday we can be civil to each other. That's all I'm hoping for." She walked away before Grace could respond. Grace sat alone in the waiting room, processing everything. Natasha was making changes. Real ones from what Grace could see. But did that erase years of cruelty? Did it mean Grace owed her forgiveness? Alexander arrived an hour later. Grace had texted him asking him to come. He sat beside her and took her hand. "How are you doing?" "Confused," Grace admitted. "Natasha seems different. Like genuinely different, not just putting on a show." "People can change," Alexander said. "But change takes time to prove. You don't have to decide anything today." "I don't want her in my life," Grace said. But I also don't want to be the kind of person who refuses to acknowledge when someone is trying to do better. You're allowed to protect yourself, Alexander reminded her. Forgiveness doesn't mean giving someone unlimited chances to hurt you again. Grace knew he was right. She could acknowledge Natasha's efforts without opening herself up to being hurt again. She could wish her stepsister well from a distance without becoming vulnerable to more manipulation. Let's go home, Grace said. I've done my duty by being here. The rest is up to them. As they drove back to their house, Grace felt a weight lift. She'd shown up for her mother. She'd seen that Natasha was trying to change. But she didn't have to do more than that. She could move forward with her own life without being dragged back into old patterns. The bed and breakfast was her focus now. Creating something beautiful and welcoming. Building a business she could be proud of. Living the life she'd always dreamed about with the man she loved. Natasha's problems were no longer her responsibility to solve. 2 months after Robert's heart attack, the Victorian house was nearly complete. Grace walked through the rooms with a sense of wonder. Everything looked exactly as she'd envisioned. Better, even. The 6 guest rooms each had their own character. The rose room had soft pink walls and antique furniture. The garden room featured botanical prints and a view of the restored garden. The library room had floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a reading nook. Each one was designed to make guests feel like they were staying in someone's home, not a sterile hotel. The common areas were equally charming. A cozy living room with comfortable sofas and a fireplace. A dining room with a table that could seat 12. A wraparound porch with rocking chairs and hanging plants. Grace had even added a small gift shop near the entrance where she'd sell local crafts and homemade jams. This is perfect, Rachel said as she toured the finished house. Grace, this is exactly what you described all those times we talked about your dream. It feels surreal, Grace admitted. Like I'm going to wake up and it'll all disappear. It's real. And you did this. Not Alexander, not anyone else. You. That was important to Grace. Yes, Alexander had provided the funding. But every decision, every detail, every choice had been hers. This was her accomplishment. The grand opening was scheduled for 2 weeks away. Grace had sent invitations to local media, travel bloggers, and potential corporate clients who might book rooms for business travelers. She'd hired a small staff including a cook, a housekeeper, and a part-time desk clerk. Everything was falling into place. Nervous? Alexander asked the night before the opening. Terrified, Grace said. What if nobody comes? What if they come but hate it? What if I've made a huge mistake? You haven't made a mistake. This place is beautiful and you're going to be amazing at running it. How do you know? Because I've watched you work. You have a gift for making people feel welcome and cared for. That's what hospitality is really about, and you've got it naturally. Grace wanted to believe him. But the doubt lingered. The grand opening day was perfect weather. Sunny and mild with a light breeze. Grace had arranged for a ribbon-cutting ceremony at noon, followed by tours and refreshments. The mayor showed up, which surprised Grace. So did several city council members and local business owners. News crews from 2 stations filmed the ceremony. By the time Grace cut the ribbon, there were nearly 50 people watching. Welcome to the Thornton House Bed and Breakfast, Grace said, trying to keep her voice steady. This has been my dream for as long as I can remember. A place where people feel at home, where they're treated like family, where every detail is designed for comfort and joy. I hope you'll all come in and see what we've created. The crowd applauded. Grace led tours through the house, answering questions and accepting compliments. People seemed genuinely impressed. Several guests booked rooms on the spot. Rachel pulled Grace aside during a quiet moment. You're a natural at this. Look at you working the room like a pro. I'm just being myself, Grace said. Exactly. That's what makes it work. By the end of the day, Grace had bookings for the next 2 months. Several travel bloggers asked to come stay for complimentary nights in exchange for reviews. A local company inquired about booking all 6 rooms for a corporate retreat. Today was a success, Alexander said that evening as they collapsed on the couch at home. You should be proud. I am proud, Grace said. But now the real work begins. I have to actually run this place. You will. And I'll help however I can. Over the next few weeks, Grace settled into a routine. She'd arrive at the Thornton house early each morning to greet guests at breakfast. She'd spend the day managing the property, solving problems, and making sure everything ran smoothly. She'd return home in the evening exhausted but satisfied. The reviews started coming in and they were overwhelmingly positive. Guests raved about the comfortable rooms, the delicious breakfasts, and especially about Grace's warm hospitality. The owner made us feel like we were staying with family, one review read. She remembered our names, asked about our day, and went out of her way to make our anniversary special. We'll definitely be back. Another review said, this isn't just a place to sleep. It's an experience. Every detail is thoughtfully planned. The homemade cookies at check-in, the local recommendations, the cozy common areas. We felt genuinely cared for. Grace read each review multiple times, hardly believing people were talking about her place, her dream made real. 3 months after opening, the Thornton house was consistently booked solid. Grace had to hire additional staff to keep up with demand. She'd started offering special packages for weddings, anniversaries, and other celebrations. The business was not just surviving but thriving. You're officially a success, Alexander said one evening as they reviewed the quarterly financials. The Thornton house is profitable after only 3 months. That's extraordinary. It doesn't feel real, Grace said. It is real. You built something people love. That's not luck. That's skill and hard work. Grace's mother had found her own apartment and started working as an event coordinator again. Her divorce from Robert was finalized without much drama. He'd been chastened by his heart attack and didn't fight over assets. Grace's mother walked away with a fair settlement and her dignity intact. I should have left years ago, she told Grace over coffee one Saturday morning. I'm happier now than I've been in a decade. I'm glad, Grace said. You deserve to be happy. So do you? And look at you, living your dream, married to a wonderful man, running a successful business. I'm so proud of you. The one cloud on Grace's horizon was Natasha. Her stepsister had continued making small efforts to reach out, but Grace had kept her distance. She didn't respond to texts or calls. She avoided places where they might run into each other. She wasn't ready to forgive, wasn't sure she ever would be. But she couldn't stop thinking about the change she'd seen in Natasha at the hospital. The sincerity in her apology. The apparent effort she was making to become a better person. What do you think I should do? Grace asked Rachel one day as they had lunch at the Thornton house. About Natasha? I think you should do whatever feels right for you, Rachel said. Nobody can tell you when to forgive someone or if you even should forgive them. She seems like she's really trying to change. Maybe she is. But that doesn't mean you owe her anything. She can change for herself, not because you'll give her another chance. Grace knew Rachel was right. But part of her wanted to believe in redemption, wanted to think that people could overcome their worst qualities and become better. I might reach out to her, Grace said. Not to be friends. But maybe to acknowledge that I see she's making an effort. Just be careful, Rachel warned. Protect yourself first. That evening, Grace sent Natasha a simple text. I heard you're doing well at your new job. I'm glad you're figuring things out. The response came almost immediately. Thank you. That means a lot. I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I appreciate it. Grace didn't respond to that message. She'd said what she needed to say. The rest was up to Natasha. Life continued moving forward. The Thornton house had a waiting list for bookings. Grace hired a manager to handle day-to-day operations so she could focus on expansion plans. She was already looking at a second property in a nearby town. Alexander's business was also thriving. He'd opened 2 new hotels in the past 6 months and was negotiating for a third. He and Grace had developed a comfortable routine of supporting each other's work while maintaining their own identities. We make a good team, Alexander said one night as they reviewed plans for Grace's potential second property. We do, Grace agreed. Though I never imagined my life would look like this. Better or worse than you imagined? So much better. I get to do what I love. I'm with someone who supports me. My mom is happy. I have real friends and a purpose. It's everything I dreamed about and more. You earned it, Alexander reminded her. None of this was handed to you. You worked for it. Grace knew he was right. Yes, his money had helped. But the success of the Thornton house was due to her vision, her work, her genuine care for guests. She'd built something real and valuable. 6 months after the grand opening, Grace received an unexpected email. It was from a national travel magazine asking to feature the Thornton house in an article about the best bed and breakfasts in the region. This is huge, Rachel said when Grace showed her the email. National exposure. This could really put you on the map. The magazine sent a reporter and photographer to spend 2 days at the property. Grace was nervous but tried to act natural. The reporter interviewed her extensively about her vision for the business, her background, and what made the Thornton house special. What sets you apart from other bed and breakfasts? The reporter asked. Grace thought about her answer carefully. I think it's the genuine care we put into every detail. This isn't just a business to me. It's a reflection of what I believe hospitality should be. Warm, personal, and focused on making people feel valued. And your husband's hotel empire, does that influence your approach? Actually, it's the opposite, Grace said. Alexander's hotels are wonderful, but they're luxury properties aimed at a different market. The Thornton House is about comfort and connection, not about impressing people. I wanted to create something authentic. The article came out 2 months later with a gorgeous photo spread and a glowing review. Bookings tripled overnight. Grace had to start a waiting list and consider raising prices to manage demand. You've officially made it, Alexander said, holding up the magazine. National recognition. It feels overwhelming, Grace admitted. In a good way, but still overwhelming. You can handle it. You've handled everything else. Grace looked around at the life she'd built. A successful business. A loving marriage. A mother who was finally happy. Real friendships based on mutual respect. It was more than she'd ever dreamed possible. And the best part? She'd done it on her own terms. Not by conforming to what Natasha or anyone else thought she should be, but by staying true to herself and her vision. That was the real victory. Grace was reviewing applications for a new front desk position when her phone rang. A known number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello. Grace, this is Margaret Chin from the Heritage Hotel Group. The voice was professional and pleasant. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Grace sat up straighter. The Heritage Hotel Group owned over 40 boutique properties across the country. She'd studied them in college as examples of successful small-scale hospitality businesses. Of course. How can I help you? I've been reading about the Thornton House. The article in Travel and Leisure was impressive. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership opportunity with you. Grace's heart began racing. What kind of partnership? We're always looking for unique properties to add to our portfolio. The Thornton House has exactly the character and charm we value. I'd like to fly out next week to tour the property and discuss possibilities. After the call ended, Grace sat staring at her phone. A partnership with Heritage Hotel Group would be enormous. It could mean expansion, resources, national booking systems. It could also mean losing some control over her vision. That evening, she discussed it with Alexander and her mother over dinner. What do you think they're proposing? Grace's mother asked. I'm not sure. Maybe a management contract where they handle marketing and bookings but I still run operations? Or maybe they want to buy the property outright. Would you sell it? Alexander asked. Grace considered the question. I don't know. I just opened it. This is my dream, you know? Dreams can evolve, her mother said gently. You don't have to commit to anything. Just hear what they have to say. Alexander nodded. She's right. Meet with them, listen to the offer, then decide. No pressure. Margaret Chin arrived the following Tuesday with 2 associates. Grace gave them a thorough tour of the property, explaining her design choices and operational philosophy. Margaret asked insightful questions and took extensive notes. Over lunch in the dining room, Margaret laid out the proposal. We don't want to buy the Thornton House, she said. Your personal touch is what makes it special. Instead, we'd like to offer a partnership where Heritage provides resources while you maintain creative control. What kind of resources? Grace asked. National marketing, our booking platform, access to our vendor relationships for better pricing, staff training programs and operational support. We'd also help you expand if you're interested in additional properties. And what would Heritage get in return? A percentage of revenue. We'd negotiate the exact terms, but typically it's around 20% for properties of this size. Grace did quick mental math. 20% of revenue was significant, but the resources and exposure could more than make up for it. What about control? Grace asked. If I join Heritage, do I still make the decisions about how the property is run? Absolutely. That's the whole point. We're not trying to turn the Thornton House into a cookie-cutter hotel. We want to preserve what makes it unique while helping it reach its full potential. How many other properties are in the Heritage portfolio currently? 43, ranging from small bed and breakfasts like yours to larger boutique hotels with 30 or 40 rooms. After the meeting, Grace asked for time to consider the offer. Margaret gave her 2 weeks to decide. What do you think? Grace asked Alexander that evening. I think it's a good opportunity. Heritage has a solid reputation. They're known for respecting the character of individual properties. But I also know how much you value having complete control over your vision. Make sure you're comfortable with the trade-off. Grace spent the next week researching Heritage Hotel Group extensively. She called 3 owners of properties in their portfolio to ask about their experiences. All 3 were enthusiastic. Heritage gave me access to resources I never could have afforded on my own, one owner said. But they also trust me to run my property my way. It's the best of both worlds. Another said, I was skeptical at first, but joining Heritage was the best business decision I ever made. My bookings doubled in the first year. The third owner added, they're not trying to change what makes your property special. They're trying to amplify it. Grace also discovered that several Heritage properties had won national awards. The partnership seemed to help properties grow without losing their individual character. She was leaning toward accepting when Rachel raised a concern over coffee one Saturday. What if they changed their management? Rachel asked. Margaret seems great now, but what if she leaves and the new person has different ideas? The contract would presumably protect against that, Grace said. But would it really? I've seen businesses get absorbed into larger companies and lose their identity. Just be careful. Rachel's caution made Grace think. She scheduled another meeting with Margaret to discuss the specific contract terms. I want to make sure I understand exactly what I'm agreeing to, Grace said. If Heritage's leadership changes, if someone decides they want to standardize operations across all properties, what protections do I have? Margaret appreciated the directness. Good question. Let me show you the standard contract. They spent 2 hours going through every clause. Grace made notes about things she wanted changed or clarified. Margaret agreed to most of Grace's requests. You're thorough, Margaret said with a smile. I like that. We want owners who care this much about their properties. A week later, Grace received a revised contract addressing all her concerns. She had Alexander's lawyer review it. He found no major issues. It's a fair deal, the lawyer said. They're giving you resources and exposure in exchange for a revenue share, but you're retaining operational control. As long as you trust them to hold up their end, I'd say go for it. Grace signed the contract the next day. The partnership with Heritage Hotel Group transformed the Thornton House almost immediately. Within a month, bookings came from all over the country instead of just regionally. Heritage's professional photography and marketing materials made the property look even more appealing. Their booking system was seamless and user-friendly. This was a good decision, Alexander said as they reviewed the numbers 3 months after joining Heritage. Your revenue is up 40%. And I'm still running everything my way, Grace said. Margaret checks in regularly but never micromanages. It's perfect. The increased revenue allowed Grace to give raises to her staff and invest in improvements to the property. She added a small spa building in the garden offering massages and other treatments. She upgraded the kitchen to allow for more elaborate breakfast options. She also started seriously considering that second property. With Heritage's support, expansion seemed not just possible but logical. Margaret called one afternoon with an interesting proposal. There's a property in Cedar Falls that's coming on the market. Victorian mansion, similar to the Thornton House but larger. 8 guest rooms instead of 6. The current owners are retiring. I thought you might be interested in looking at it. Grace and Alexander drove to Cedar Falls the following weekend. The property was stunning. A 3-story Victorian with wraparound porches, original woodwork and beautiful gardens. It needed work but the bones were excellent. What do you think? Alexander asked as they toured the empty rooms. I think it has potential, Grace said carefully. But I don't want to spread myself too thin. I still need to be hands-on at the Thornton House. You could hire a manager for one property. Stay involved with decisions but not day-to-day operations. Grace considered this. She'd been so focused on doing everything herself that she hadn't considered delegating. But maybe that was the next step in growth. Let me think about it, she said. That evening she discussed it with her mother. What's holding you back? Her mother asked. Fear, I think. Fear that if I'm not there every day the quality will suffer. Fear that I can't replicate what makes the Thornton House special. Those are reasonable fears. But they're also limiting. If you want to build something bigger than one property, you have to trust other people to carry out your vision. I know you're right. It's just hard to let go. Start small. Hire a manager for the Thornton House so you can focus on developing the Cedar Falls property. Once that's established and running smoothly, you'll have proven to yourself that your vision can scale. It was sound advice. Grace put out feelers for a manager position and was surprised by the quality of applicants. Apparently, working at a property featured in travel and leisure was attractive to hospitality professionals. She hired Amanda, a woman with 15 years of hotel management experience who'd been looking for a smaller, more personal property to run. Amanda understood Grace's vision immediately and brought fresh ideas for implementing it. "I love what you've built here," Amanda said during her interview. "It's everything hotels should be but usually aren't. I'd be honored to help maintain and grow it." With Amanda managing the Thornton house, Grace turned her attention to the Cedar Falls property. She and Alexander made an offer which was accepted. The renovations would take 6 months, but Grace was already envisioning the finished product. The Cedar Falls Victorian would be similar in philosophy to the Thornton house but with its own distinct character. Grace planned to incorporate local history into the design, highlighting the town's lumber industry heritage in the decor. Each room would tell a story about Cedar Falls' past while offering modern comfort. Working on the second property reignited Grace's creative energy. She spent hours researching historical photographs, consulting with local historians, and designing spaces that would feel authentic and welcoming. "You're in your element," Alexander observed one evening as Grace sketched room layouts. "I really am. I love this process, taking something old and forgotten and bringing it back to life with purpose." "Have you thought about doing more properties after Cedar Falls?" "Maybe. But I don't want to grow so fast that I lose what makes each place special." "You won't. You're too conscious of quality for that." 6 months later, the Cedar Falls property opened to similar acclaim as the Thornton house. Grace had worried that she couldn't replicate her initial success, but the reviews proved otherwise. Guests loved the historical theme and the attention to detail. "You've found your niche," Margaret said during a congratulatory call. "Heritage would love to help you develop more properties if you're interested." "I might be," Grace said, "but I need to make sure I can maintain quality. That's non-negotiable." "Agreed. That's what sets you apart. Quality over quantity." A year after opening the Thornton house, Grace stood in the garden of the Cedar Falls property and looked around with satisfaction. She'd gone from serving tables to owning 2 successful bed and breakfasts. She'd proven that her vision was viable and valuable. She'd built something real and sustainable. And she'd done it without compromising who she was or what she believed in. That was the real measure of success. The second anniversary of opening the Thornton house approached, and Grace decided to host a celebration. She sent invitations to everyone who'd supported her journey: her staff, her mother, Rachel, Alexander's business associates who'd become friends, and even some of her regular guests who'd become like family. She didn't invite Natasha. They'd exchanged occasional polite texts over the past year, but Grace hadn't felt ready to welcome her stepsister back into her life in any meaningful way. Some wounds took more than time to heal. The morning of the celebration, Grace woke to find Alexander already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Just thinking about how far you've come. 2 years ago you were worried that nobody would come to your grand opening. Now you're celebrating running 2 successful properties with a waiting list at both. It doesn't feel like it's been 2 years. That's because you've been busy living your dream instead of watching time pass." The celebration was scheduled for late afternoon. Grace spent the morning at the Thornton house making sure everything was perfect. Amanda had the operations well in hand, but Grace still couldn't resist checking details. "Everything looks beautiful," Amanda assured her. "Stop worrying and enjoy your party." Rachel arrived early to help with final preparations. She'd become close friends with Alexander's assistant, Elena, and the 2 of them handled logistics while Grace greeted early arrivals. The party filled the house and spilled onto the porches and lawn. Nearly 70 people came to celebrate. Grace moved through the crowd accepting congratulations and catching up with friends. Her mother stood in the garden talking with Margaret from Heritage Hotel Group. They seemed to be having an animated conversation about event planning. Grace felt a surge of happiness seeing her mother so comfortable and confident. The divorce had been hard, but it had also freed her to rediscover herself. "Grace, there's someone here to see you," Rachel said, appearing at her elbow with an odd expression. "Who?" "Just come with me." Grace followed Rachel to the front porch, wondering what was going on. Then she saw Natasha standing at the bottom of the steps, holding a wrapped gift and looking nervous. "I know I wasn't invited," Natasha said quickly. "I'm not trying to crash your party. I just wanted to drop off a gift and congratulate you. I'll leave right after." Grace should have been angry. This was her celebration, and Natasha showing up uninvited was inappropriate. But looking at her stepsister now, she couldn't muster the anger. Natasha looked different. Her clothes were nice but not designer. Her hair was styled simply. She wore minimal makeup. She looked like a regular person instead of trying to project wealth and status. "What's the gift?" Grace asked. Natasha held it out. It's a photo album. I went through my dad's old pictures and found photos from when our parents first started dating. Before everything got complicated. I thought you might want them. Your mom looks so happy in them. Grace took the package but didn't open it. Why are you really here? Because you deserve to be celebrated. Because I'm genuinely proud of what you've accomplished. And because I wanted you to know that I'm still working on being better. How's that going? Some days are good, some are hard. I got promoted at my job last month. I'm dating someone who likes me for me, not for who my father is. I'm in therapy learning to deal with my issues instead of taking them out on other people. Natasha paused. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to see that I'm trying. Grace studied her stepsister. She saw sincerity there but also wariness. Natasha expected to be rejected, expected Grace to send her away. And Grace realized she had a choice in this moment. She could hold on to her resentment forever, or she could acknowledge that people were capable of change. Do you want to come in? Grace heard herself ask. Natasha's eyes widened. What? It's a party? There's food and drinks and people celebrating. You can come in if you want. Are you sure? I don't want to make you uncomfortable. You will make me uncomfortable, Grace said honestly. But maybe it's time to try being uncomfortable for the right reasons instead of comfortable in my resentment. Natasha looked like she might cry. Thank you. I promise I won't cause any problems. If you do, Rachel will personally throw you out. She's very protective. They walked inside together. Several people stared, clearly recognizing Natasha from the wedding disaster 2 years earlier. But Grace introduced her stepsister calmly, and people followed her lead in being polite if not warm. Grace's mother appeared, stopping short when she saw Natasha. What are you doing here? I invited her, Grace said before Natasha could speak. She brought a gift and I thought it would be okay if she stayed for a bit. Grace's mother looked between them, clearly uncertain. If you're sure. I'm sure. It's time we all moved forward. The party continued, though Grace was hyper-aware of Natasha's presence. Her stepsister stayed quiet, mostly observing. She congratulated Grace again, admired the house, and thanked several people for their hospitality. She seemed genuinely trying to be a good guest. Alexander pulled Grace aside at one point. You okay with her being here? I think so. She's different. I don't trust her completely yet, but I think she really is trying to change. Your call. I just want to make sure you're not being pressured. I'm not. This is my choice. As the sun set, guests began to leave. Natasha approached Grace one more time. Thank you for letting me stay. It meant more than you know. Natasha, I need you to understand something. This doesn't fix everything. You hurt me badly for years. That doesn't disappear because you've made some changes. I know. But I also recognize that you're trying. And I want to believe people can be better than their worst moments. So maybe we can start over. Not as sisters, but as people who share a complicated history and want to move past it. I'd like that. And Grace? I really am sorry. Not just for the wedding but for everything. All those years of being cruel. I was wrong. Grace nodded. Apology accepted. But trust has to be earned over time. This is just the beginning. I understand. Thank you for even giving me that chance. After Natasha left, Rachel appeared with 2 glasses of wine. I can't believe you let her in. I can barely believe it myself. Do you think she's genuine? I think she's trying to be. Whether she succeeds long-term remains to be seen. But I'm tired of carrying around all that anger and resentment. It was weighing me down. You're a better person than I am. I'd have made her leave. Maybe. But look at my life now, Rachel. I have everything I ever wanted. A business I love, a husband who supports me, my mom is happy, I have real friends. Natasha can't take any of that away from me. So why not give her a chance to prove she's changed? They sat on the porch watching the last guests leave. Alexander joined them, settling into a rocking chair. Hell of a party, he said. Hell of a 2 years, Grace replied. The following weeks fell into familiar patterns. Grace split her time between both properties, working with her managers to maintain quality while developing systems that would allow for potential expansion. Heritage approached her about a 3rd property, but Grace wasn't ready yet. 2 locations felt manageable. 3 felt overwhelming. Her relationship with Natasha remained cautious but cordial. They texted occasionally, met for coffee once a month, and were slowly building something that resembled friendship. Or at least civil coexistence. Grace's mother reported that Robert's health had improved but their divorce was final. She'd started dating someone new, a kind man who treated her with respect. She seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years. Everything is coming together, Alexander observed one evening as they reviewed plans for minor renovations at the Cedar Falls property. It really is. Sometimes I feel guilty about how good things are. Why guilty? Because not everyone gets this. A career they love, a marriage that works, family relationships that heal. I feel lucky. You worked for this, Grace. You didn't just get lucky. You made hard choices and stayed true to yourself even when it would have been easier to compromise. She knew he was right. She'd turned down easier paths multiple times. Could have married someone wealthy just for security. Could have stayed in a job she hated because it was safe. Could have maintained toxic relationships to avoid conflict. But she'd chosen differently at every turn. The Cedar Falls property won a regional tourism award 3 months after opening. Grace attended the ceremony with Alexander and her mother. When her name was called, she walked to the stage feeling like she was floating. "Thank you so much for this recognition," she said into the microphone. The Cedar Falls Victorian is a labor of love, dedicated to preserving history while creating comfort. I'm honored that it resonates with visitors. After the ceremony, she was approached by several people interested in partnering with her on new projects. She collected business cards and promised to be in touch, though she still wasn't ready to expand beyond 2 properties. "You're in demand," Margaret said with a smile. "That award put you on a lot of people's radar. Is that good or bad?" "It's good as long as you maintain your standards and don't grow faster than you can manage. Which I trust you to do." Grace appreciated the vote of confidence. That night, lying in bed beside Alexander, Grace reflected on how different her life was from what she'd imagined 2 years earlier. She'd expected struggle and uncertainty. Instead, she'd found success and stability. She'd expected to carry resentment toward Natasha forever. Instead, she was tentatively rebuilding that relationship. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked in the darkness. "About how nothing turned out the way I expected." "Is that good or bad?" "It's good. Better than good. I just wonder sometimes if I deserve all of this." Alexander rolled over to face her. "Grace, you deserve every bit of happiness you have. You're kind, you work hard, you care about people. The universe doesn't owe you suffering just because you grew up without money. When did you get so wise?" "I've always been this wise. You just never noticed." Grace laughed and kissed him. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt grateful for everything that had led to this moment. The struggles, the triumphs, even the painful relationships. All of it had shaped her into someone capable of building the life she'd always wanted. And the best part? She was just getting started. 1 year later, Grace stood in the garden of her 3rd property, watching the sun rise over the mountains. The Alpine retreat had been her most ambitious project yet, a restored ski lodge converted into a year-round destination. Opening was scheduled for next week, and Grace felt the familiar mixture of excitement and nerves. Alexander appeared beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "Couldn't sleep? Too much on my mind. This property is so different from the other 2. What if people don't respond to it?" "They will. You have a gift for reading what people want and delivering it. This place is spectacular." The Alpine retreat had been a risk. It was larger than her other properties, with 12 rooms instead of 6 or 8. It was also in a different market, catering to outdoor enthusiasts and adventure travelers. But Grace had fallen in love with the building and the location, and she trusted her instincts. Those instincts had proven reliable so far. Advance bookings were strong. The local tourism board was excited about having a quality property in the area. Everything looked promising. "Come on," Alexander said. "Let's go back to the house. You need to eat breakfast before the final walkthrough." They drove back to their home, the original house that had seemed so overwhelming when Grace first moved in. It felt cozy and familiar now, filled with photos from their travels and mementos from Grace's properties. Grace's mother was in the kitchen making pancakes. She'd become an unofficial advisor for all 3 properties, using her event planning expertise to help with marketing and special events. She'd also started her own consulting business, helping other small hospitality businesses develop their brand identity. "Big day," she said, plating pancakes. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous. Excited. Terrified. Same as always then." Rachel arrived for breakfast, bringing pastries from her favorite bakery. She'd been promoted to manager at her own job and was thriving in her career. She'd also started dating Amanda, the manager Grace had hired for the original Thornton house. The 4 of them had become close friends. "Amanda says the Thornton house is fully booked for the next 3 months, Rachel reported. "And the Cedar Falls Victorian is doing almost as well. You've got a winning formula, Grace." I hope the Alpine retreat follows the same pattern. It will. Stop worrying. The doorbell rang. Grace opened it to find Natasha standing there with a bouquet of flowers. I know I'm early, Natasha said, but I wanted to give you these before everyone else arrived. And I wanted to say how proud I am of you. Grace accepted the flowers, still sometimes surprised by how much her relationship with Natasha had improved. They'd never be as close as real sisters, but they'd built something genuine over the past year. Natasha had continued her therapy, maintained her job, and slowly rebuilt her life on a foundation of authenticity instead of appearances. Thank you. Want to come in for breakfast? If I'm not intruding. You're not. The group sat around the kitchen table eating and talking. 5 years earlier, Grace couldn't have imagined this scene. Her stepsister at her table looking comfortable and genuine. Her mother happy and successful in her own right. Her husband supporting her dreams without trying to control them. Her best friend dating someone Grace had hired. It was messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. The week passed in a blur of final preparations. The grand opening of the Alpine retreat was scheduled for Saturday. Grace had invited fewer people this time, wanting to keep it more intimate than the previous celebrations. But word had spread anyway and nearly 100 people showed up. The mayor of the local town. Representatives from the state tourism board. Travel bloggers and journalists. Loyal guests from Grace's other properties who'd made the drive to support her. Welcome to the Alpine retreat, Grace said during the ribbon cutting. This property represents everything I've learned about hospitality over the past 3 years. It's designed for adventure seekers who want comfort after a day of exploring. For families who want to make memories together. For anyone who needs a break from the ordinary. She cut the ribbon to enthusiastic applause. The crowd flowed inside to tour the property. Grace had designed the common areas to feel like a sophisticated mountain lodge. Stone fireplaces, comfortable seating, large windows showcasing the mountain views. Each guest room had its own character while maintaining a cohesive mountain theme. The feedback was immediately positive. People loved the combination of rustic charm and modern amenities. The gourmet breakfast options featuring local ingredients. The outdoor hot tub with mountain views. The lending library of hiking guides and local history books. You've done it again, Margaret said, pulling Grace aside. This is going to be another success. I hope so. It's been a lot of work. The best things usually are. That evening, after all the guests had left, Grace's closest friends and family gathered for a private celebration. Alexander opened champagne. Grace's mother made a toast about following dreams no matter how impossible they seemed. Rachel told embarrassing stories about Grace's early days at the restaurant. Natasha stood and raised her glass. Everyone fell quiet, clearly uncertain what she'd say. I know my presence here is still surprising to some of you, Natasha began. And I understand why. I was terrible to Grace for a long time. But I want to publicly acknowledge something. Grace's success isn't despite the hardships she faced. It's because of who she is at her core. She stayed true to herself when it would have been easier to compromise. She valued people over status. She chose authenticity over appearances. Natasha looked directly at Grace. You taught me that real success isn't about having money or impressing people. It's about building something meaningful and treating people with dignity. I'm sorry it took me so long to learn that lesson. And I'm grateful you gave me the chance to be part of your life again, even in a small way. Grace felt tears in her eyes. Thank you. No, thank you. For showing me what actually matters. They hugged, and Grace realized she'd truly forgiven her stepsister. Not forgotten but forgiven. It felt like setting down a heavy weight she'd been carrying for years. The party continued late into the night. Grace found herself standing on the back deck looking at the stars, thinking about how far she'd come. Happy? Alexander asked, joining her. Incredibly happy. Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life. Believe it? You earned every bit of it. Grace leaned against him, feeling grateful for everything. The struggles that had made her stronger. The people who'd supported her. The dreams she'd pursued despite the obstacles. The second chances she'd given and received. What's next? Alexander asked. Any more properties in your future? Maybe. But I'm not in a rush. 3 feels like a good number right now. I want to make sure each one maintains the quality that makes them special. Wise decision. I learned from the best. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Grace thought about the girl she'd been at 12, feeling like she didn't belong in Robert Sterling's house. Feeling less than unwelcome judged. That girl would be amazed by the woman Grace had become. A successful businesswoman. A wife to someone who truly valued her. A daughter to a mother who'd finally chosen herself. A friend to people who cared about her for who she was, not what she had. "I love you," Grace said to Alexander. "I love you too. Thank you for believing in me. For keeping your identity secret so we could build something real. For supporting my dreams without trying to take them over. Thank you for seeing me as more than my bank account. For loving me when you thought I was just a waiter. For building this amazing life with me." They kissed under the stars and Grace felt complete. Not because she'd married someone wealthy. Not because she'd achieved business success. But because she'd stayed true to herself throughout everything. That was the real happy ending. Not the money or the properties or the recognition. But knowing she'd built a life based on authenticity, hard work, and genuine connection. Knowing she'd overcome the people who tried to make her feel small. Knowing she'd created something meaningful that helped other people feel welcome and valued. 6 months later, Grace was interviewed for a podcast about women entrepreneurs in hospitality. The host asked what advice she'd give to others starting out. "Stay true to your vision," Grace said. "There will always be people who tell you it can't be done or that you're not good enough. Sometimes those people are family members or people you want to impress. But the only opinion that really matters is your own. If you believe in what you're building, if you're willing to work for it, and if you refuse to compromise on quality or integrity, you can create something amazing." "What about handling criticism?" the host asked. "Criticism is inevitable. Some of it will be valid and help you improve. Some of it will be rooted in other people's insecurities or prejudices. Learn to tell the difference. Take the useful feedback and ignore the rest. Don't let anyone else's limitations define what you can achieve." After the podcast aired, Grace received dozens of messages from listeners thanking her for sharing her story. Several women said they'd been inspired to pursue their own dreams after hearing about Grace's journey. "You're becoming a role model," Rachel observed when Grace showed her some of the messages. "That's weird to think about." "It's not weird. It's what happens when you succeed on your own terms. People see that and realize they can do it too." Grace continued running her 3 properties while mentoring other women interested in hospitality careers. She spoke at business conferences, wrote articles for industry publications, and consulted with Heritage Hotel Group on identifying promising new properties. Her relationship with Natasha continued to heal slowly. They'd never be best friends, but they'd become people who genuinely cared about each other's well-being. Natasha had been promoted again at her job and was thriving in her own career. She'd learned to value relationships over status, and it showed in the quality of friendships she was building. Grace's mother was happier than she'd been in decades. Her consulting business was successful. Her relationship with her new partner was healthy and supportive. She'd finally created the life she deserved. And Alexander continued to be Grace's rock. He'd expanded his own business while supporting hers, celebrating her successes as enthusiastically as his own. They built a true partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. 5 years after that disastrous wedding interruption, Grace hosted an anniversary party at the original Thornton house. She invited everyone who'd been at the wedding, wanting to show them how far she'd come. 5 years ago, someone told me I was pathetic for marrying Alexander," Grace said during her speech. "That person thought money was the only measure of worth. But I learned something important. True wealth isn't about bank accounts. It's about relationships, purpose, and living authentically. I'm wealthy because I have people who love me, work that fulfills me, and a life I'm proud of. That's what really matters." The crowd applauded. Grace looked around at the faces of people who'd supported her journey. Her mother beaming with pride. Rachel grinning with her arm around Amanda. Margaret from Heritage nodding approvingly. Her staff members who'd become like family. And Natasha sitting in the back clapping harder than anyone. After the speech, Natasha approached Grace. "Thank you for inviting me. Of course, you're part of this story too. I'm the villain in this story." "You were the villain," Grace corrected gently. "Past tense. Now you're just someone who's trying to do better. That's all any of us can do." Natasha smiled. "When did you become so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just never noticed." They both laughed and it felt good. Natural. Like maybe they really could be friends someday. That night, lying in bed beside Alexander, Grace reflected on her journey. From feeling like she didn't belong anywhere to building a life she loved. From being judged for who she wasn't to being celebrated for who she was. From carrying resentment to offering forgiveness. From dreaming about success to actually achieving it. No regrets. Alexander asked. "Not a single one," Grace said. "Every hardship led me here. Every struggle taught me something important. Even the painful parts were worth it. I'm glad. You deserve all of this happiness. So do you. They fell asleep holding hands, two people who'd found each other despite the obstacles. Two people who'd built something real in a world that often valued appearance over substance. And Grace knew that no matter what challenges came next, she could handle them. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. Her worth didn't depend on anyone else's opinion. She was enough exactly as she was. And that knowledge was the greatest gift she could ever receive.